All right, so today we are talking about programming. Over the years, I've watched pretty much every single optimal split, best this, best that video, and I've also written an ungodly amount of programs for not only myself, but for others that have been greatly effective. And it turns out all the best ones, all the programs that are the most effective at achieving whatever goal it is you're trying to achieve, are written in the exact same way. I'm going to break down that entire framework, and by the end, you're going to have a fully written program that you can start using today. Now, before we get into designing our split and actually writing our program, we need to understand one super crucial concept, and that is training experience. But experience in this sense isn't like how long you've been lifting, how much experience you have in the way we traditionally use the word, but experience in this sense means what you need to progress, what stimulus you need to continue to grow in whatever way you're trying to grow. And you want to progress your experience level as slowly as possible. First, let's figure out where you are. Most of you are going to be in this beginner or intermediate category. Now, beginners, if you're a beginner, this means that literally anything works for gains. You can work out however you want, you can eat however you want, you can even be in the middle of a fat loss journey and a major deficit and still be making easy gains. So if you're doing those things, you're a beginner. Next, once you plateau once, that's pretty much when you become an intermediate. This isn't an issue though, because with some mindful programming and diet, you can easily make gains again. You're probably not going to make gains in a deficit at this point, but it is possible, and at maintenance, you're probably going to make little to no gains. Okay, so now we need to design our split. So if you're brand new, you're basically going to be training either 2 or 3 days a week. There's a couple reasons for this. First, we just talked about wanting to keep your experience level as low as possible, what you need to progress, and 2 or 3 days a week is all you need to progress at this point. You're not leaving any gains on the table, and also you're probably not going to like lifting very much if you're brand new. It kind of hurts, you kind of get sore, and you're probably not going to love that if you've never done it before or seen any progress. So this is a good place to start for you. Now, if you have already been lifting and you're pretty acclimated to what you've been doing, maybe you've plateaued once or twice, you probably will see better results from training 4 or 5, maybe even 6 days a week. Now, depending on how many days per week you decide to train, there's really three different main base layouts we can use to start writing our programs. So if you're training 2 or 3 days a week, you're almost certainly going to be doing total body. If you're training 4 days a week, you're almost certainly going to be doing upper lower. And then 5 or 6 days a week, that's when you can start getting into some more granular splits like push pull legs. The reason is really just a frequency bottleneck. If you train only 3 days a week and you do push pull legs, you're hitting everything only once a week. And we can do more. We can always do more than 1 day a week per thing. Real quick, if you want to let your program write alongside me as we go through all this, click the link in the description and get access to the program designer that I built absolutely for free. Okay, now that we have our split designed, our days laid out, let's lay out our movements. Movement layout is very simple. For each day, which should already be laid out according to your priorities, and then for each type of movement, you're going to order first by priority. Why did I say it like that? Priority, and then secondly by fatigue. So as you can see in all these programs, you'll see all of our pushes are together, all of our pulls stay together, and then same thing for our lower body. All the pulling movements or isolation movements that involve the pushing or pulling muscles, those are all always grouped together. And unless you're doing antagonistic supersets, which if you're in a time crunch is a totally valid way to do things, it's just kind of a pain in the ass to keep re-warming up your muscles. If you do chest and then triceps and then delts, your triceps and delts are going to get warm from whatever press you're doing most likely. And then same thing for your pulls. We order by priority and then fatigue. That's going to go biggest to smallest usually. So we normally, in the push muscle group, in the group of pushes or pressing muscles, your chest is normally going to fatigue you the most, and your triceps and your delts. So if you're indifferent, it's just fatigue. But if you have any priorities, like triceps are your priority over your chest, you would do those first. And then same thing for back and biceps. If you're indifferent, you do likely your back first because it's a bigger set of muscles, and you're likely going to be doing some rows or pull downs or pull ups, which are very fatiguing. So you'd want to do those before you do your isolation curls. But obviously, if your biceps are more important, then you would train your biceps first. Okay, so now that we have our targets laid out, it's time to choose our movements. First things first, joint pain. If you do have joint pain, you should try, or you don't have to, but you can try different form variations before tossing this movement forever. Especially if you are brand new or a beginner, it's likely you're not going to be using enough weight to give yourself too much joint pain, and it's likely that some different form tweaks, which we will go over in a second, will help alleviate that joint pain. Now, if there is no joint pain, first things first, are you a beginner? And then if you are a beginner and you don't have joint pain, congrats, you found a good movement for that target. If you're not a beginner and you have no joint pain, then you should ask yourself, do you get good pumps slash feel it in the target muscle when you do this movement? If yes, then it's probably a good movement. Now, I put this secondly because this isn't the greatest, this isn't the end all be all for if it's a good movement or not. It's just another proxy that we can use for muscle growth, another indicator that you are targeting what you want to target and without pain. And those are all good things for growing muscle. Now, if the reason I don't do this if you're a beginner is because when you're a beginner, it's really hard for you to feel exactly what you're doing or have mind muscle connection when you're doing movements, and you're still going to grow anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Now, again, if you don't have joint pain and then you're not a beginner, and say you don't get pumps or feel in the target muscle, try other variations or just try the movement for a few weeks. And then, if this is so bad that you hate the movement, you can then toss it and try something else. Okay, so choosing movements for 2 to 3 day per week individuals. This is very simple. We're not really laying them out by target like I have it here. We're really laying it out by pattern. And this is because we have less days, and so we want as much target muscle bang for our movement buck, which means basically we're just doing compound movements. Now, again, don't think that we are sacrificing gains at this point. Like I said, everything is going to grow everything at this stage. And this is just the best way to stay in that beginner category for as long as possible. This is the smallest stimulus you need to grow at this point. And so there aren't really correct answers in terms of equipment, but there are technique considerations that we're going to go over. Okay, so real quick, let's go over these technique considerations. For movements, we have isolation and we have compound. Compound movements, like we talked about, your horizontal and vertical presses, your horizontal and vertical pulls, your hip hinges, and your squat patterns. So under the compound category, there's this spectrum of like compound versus isolation compound. And that's what these technique considerations are all about. For like a bench press, for example, the closer your grip goes, the more tricep you're going to have, because the more the more you're going to flex your elbow. And then extending your elbow out of flexion is what your tricep does. So if you go wider, your elbow is not really going to be flexing a ton. You're going to be getting a lot of chest and front delt, which is totally fine, but just something to consider. So movement variations for presses, like we just talked about, grip width, narrower equals more triceps. And you also have incline. The steeper the incline, the more upper chest and front delt. Now you can go as wide or as narrow as you want. You can go as inclined or declined as you want. And you can also use these variations with anything. It doesn't matter if you're pressing with dumbbells, on a Smith machine, with a barbell, on a plate loaded or a selectorized machine. It doesn't matter. Now for pulls, it's a little more complicated. There's like one more variable to consider, and the first one's going to be your elbow. So where you pull your elbows. If you pull your elbows to your side more, like this, so you keep your which way should I turn this way? So say you keep your shoulder locked right here. You don't retract your scapula or let them round forward. You keep it right here and you pull your elbow to your side. That's going to get a ton of lat. That's what your lat does. The wider you go, the more you flare your elbows out. You're still going to get lats, but it's going to be probably more upper back in that situation. So that leads us into our second variable for your pulls. That's scapular retraction. So your scapula, your shoulder blades, when you let your shoulders round forward on your pulls, so you're doing rows, your arms get out in front of you, and then you try to crush an apple with your back. Pretend there's like an apple between your shoulder blades, and you crush it, letting your shoulders rock back and forth over your chest wall, I guess. That's scapular retraction, and that's going to allow you to target more your upper slash mid back. And then your grip. So grip for pulls, we have the overhand grip, the normal grip, you have the neutral grip, and then you have the underhand grip. And the more you go towards underhand, neutral being the least, more, and then the most, you're going to activate more biceps. And this isn't like if you pull your elbows out to your side, you flare out to your side when you do your pulls, that you're not going to get any lat. That's not true. And it's not like you need to have a perfectly even distribution of targeted or more isolation compounds for all these different variations. This is just something to consider. Like maybe one day everything isn't going to be growing at the exact same rate, and you're going to have some muscles lagging behind, and you're going to, along with your isolations, be able to target those muscles more to get them caught up, or do whatever you want to do. I just want you to be able to know what you're doing with these different variations. And then, yeah, for squats, you have your stance. Narrower means more quad isolation because your knees are going to be a little more flexed. And then the width is going to increase abductor or adductor involvement. And then for lunges, you have your foot placement, Farther in front is going to target more glutes. Closer is going to be more quads for the same knee flexion angle degree reason. Okay, now the last part in laying out the program is the sets and reps for each of the movements. This also is very straightforward. If you're a beginner, you're going to be doing probably 6 to 10 reps for your compound movements that you're doing at first. And there's a couple reasons for this. The biggest one though is you probably don't have great technique with these compounds. And if you do get tired and do a ton of reps, your form is going to break down very quickly. And the reason that most people don't do higher reps or lower reps, higher weight all the time is because of fatigue. It'll fuck up your joints, and because you're a beginner, you're also likely not using a ton of weight, and so that's not a consideration. And so for those reasons, 6 to 10 reps for your compounds at first. You can progress obviously as you work through that. Is a good place to start. Now, if you're not a beginner, you just ask yourself, is the rep range stupid? And if it is, you adjust accordingly as needed. Now, what do I mean by a stupid rep range? So if you're benching, it's usually not hard to add small amounts of weight to your bench. But your lateral raise, say you start with like the 20s or 25s, you're not going to be able to add 5 pounds every single week to lateral raises. When you're writing these out or thinking about before you go to the gym what rep ranges you're going to work in for each movement, just think about those two things: joint pain, really, and what's the scalability of this? How long can I realistically progress in this way without it becoming an absolute mess? Like I said, click the link in the description to get access to the program design tool that I built for free.